Welcome. The Fantasmagorium show presents Guns, Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns. We are full tilt boogie towards No Time to Die, and we are super kissed and banged. I am Scotty. My opposite number, Catherine, is here, and Steve's on special assignment once again. He is in the... Where is... Space? Is Steve in space?
Perhaps.
All right. Anyway, so, No Time to Die apparently is a thing, and we no longer have to question as to whether or not it's coming. There have been featurettes. There have been press releases. Kat, what is going on? Am I going to be able to finally see this movie?
Yes, you are.
Yay.
Tickets go on sale Friday, and they are already on sale for the UK residents. And it also just got greenlit for a release in China, which is good.
Oh, okay. Well, that's neat. Well, and that also, when it comes to the box office expectations of what's going to happen with No Time to Die, having hey, if China's going to sell it, we need that Chinese market, right?
Yes.
Like, that's a moneymaker, from what I understand. And so I'm glad that is a market where people can actually go see a James Bond movie. It's an international franchise, really.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and there have been press releases. There was the New Agents that came out, didn't they say?
Yeah, they had a little featurette, New Agents, for Nomi and Paloma, and they had a couple weeks ago, Aston Martin released another featurette. There have been a lot of mini featurettes, and Heineken just put out its other Bond commercial, and it's like, now we're not going to go all out like we did last time with a whole foot chase and car chase and things like that. We're just going to have him sitting at the bar, getting poured a drink, and like, yep, it's worth the wait. Because it's like, yeah, we can't really. It's like we should probably acknowledge how it just it's been straining the fan base that it's been dragged out this long.
Mm-hmm.
And then other little promotional bits is that the Aston Martin Formula One team is going to have their 007 decals this weekend. Michael G. Wilson and his son Greg, who like to take a lot of behind-the-scenes photographs, actually have an exhibit, Leica exhibit, in various museums around the world right now. I know the one in LA is at least open through October 11th. There's one in Frankfurt, London, so there's that to check out. And the Bond in Motion exhibit, which had been in London for the longest time and shut down either last year or the year before, it's moving to Los Angeles and is going to run from September 25th this year through October 22nd of next year. So that'll be really cool. Yes, you could check out the Bond cars and some of them anyway. And that'll be pretty cool. So
absolutely.
Other than that, it's like, yeah, we're getting close to release date.
I appreciate that you put that, just like slap it in front of the Death Star.
Yes.
So now, and also they announced how long the movie is going to be.
Yeah, we've had that one up for a while. 2 hours 43 minutes.
Is that excessive?
Yeah, I think it is for a Bond.
Okay.
You assume that probably 5-6 minutes of that is probably the end credits and stuff. So, yeah, it'll be over 2.5 hours long. 2:35, 2:37. It's like, that's pretty long for a Bond movie. I think Spectre was the longest, up at 2:28. So, I think it really all comes down to editing and pacing. To see if it slows down at all. But yeah, I think in general that might be too long.
Now, I'm not 100% familiar with. Does Billie Eilish do the theme song?
Yes.
And I'm not 100% familiar with that song yet. I prefer to put it together with the opening titles before I judge the song. Mm-hmm. I think that is fair when it comes to a James Bond theme. And so I don't know. I hope that the song is good. I hope that is it a kick-ass song, or is it sort of a weak sauce song?
It's a somber song.
Oh, I don't like that. Sounds weak sauce to me. But you know what doesn't have a weak sauce song? Casino Royale.
True. Speaking of which, I lead into the topic for tonight. I noticed how, the first 20 films kind of follow this very strict formula. And they it's like a rinse, dry, repeat kind of thing. Like, okay, there's a pre-title action scene. There's a clue that Bond gets from it. You have your main title sequence. Then Bond goes into M's office. He gives him the assignment. Then he goes to Q branch, flirts with Moneypenny, and then he's off to the races. They've not done that at all with this current era of Bond, so to speak. With Casino Royale, it made sense to avoid it. They've been chasing those rights to get them back for a long time because, as the story goes, the book was published in 1953, and this film producer from Egypt was trying to get out of the country when the revolution happened that year. And he strangely, of all things, told himself, if I ever get out of this country, I'll make a movie out of the first book I read. It's like, okay. So he flies out, and I think he headed to London or New York, one or the other, and Casino Royale was in the airport bookstore. It was the first one he saw sitting on the rack. He bought it. That led to the 1954 TV production.
Barry Nelson.
Yes, which later led to the 1967 Woody Allen comedy movie. And then another 3 decades until Eon could finally get the rights back. In which MGM traded away their Spider-Man rights to get.
And you know what?
Yeah.
Here's just a little inside baseball when I found this out. You know what? Eon swapped the rights. It was something between Sony and MGM. Who they swapped the Casino Royale rights for?
Well, it's Spider-Man. That's what I just said.
Oh, well, then I wasn't listening, and I apologize.
Yes, it was it sounded like a pretty one-sided trade, and then but Sony eventually bought MGM, merged in 2005 or so. So then but with this film, it made sense to go back to basics because Die Another Day was just insane.
It was.
And
also, do you want to wait before we get into this, because we just finished with George Lazenby.
Yeah,
we have literally flashed forward to Daniel Craig. So from there, we have the return of Sean Connery. We have Roger Moore from being a young man at 40 to being an old man at 60. I don't know how that happened in 15 years. And then you get Timothy Dalton. Then you get Pierce Brosnan. And now we are at this is a cinematic revolution of what James Bond can be. It's already been done once to a certain extent with GoldenEye, in saying that you are a dinosaur misogynistic relic from the Cold War era, to now you are making James Bond, or at least this is the way that Casino Royale does it, is that James Bond is now, he's not a gentleman spy. He's a spy who has to be a gentleman.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was leading in for the topic. It's like they kind of abandoned the formula, and they said last week on the Being James Bond documentary, as well as 14 years ago on the Becoming Bond documentary, that the reasons they felt they couldn't do the classic Bond formula anymore was because of the Austin Powers movies. They're like, those films incessantly mocked the franchise, and I'm thinking, okay, so it's like Mike Myers loves James Bond. The idea that you can't go back at any point to using that formula just because they poked fun at it is a little odd to me. And I think their aversion to the Bond formula is why Quantum of Solace went off the rails and why the other movies in the Craig era turned out the way they have so far. Because a lot of people said that this era sort of mimics Jason Bourne. Barbara Michael said that after 9/11 happened, they felt they couldn't go back to the more classic Bond fantasy type things, which, okay, I get that you don't want to do Die Another Day stuff again, but the Bond inherently is a fantasy type spy genre. It's not as down to earth and gritty as Jason Bourne per se, but they've been trying to do that with this franchise, or this current iteration of the franchise with the Craig era. And I'm not sure how much of that is going to carry over into the next era, or how much of it should carry over per se, because I look at a movie like Quantum of Solace and I feel like it's, Jason Bourne on like steroids, just more exotic type of feel to it. Like it's not trying to be James Bond anymore.
Well, but I don't think that, do you think Casino Royale, when I went and walked into the theater and saw it for the first time, I was aware of the Jason Bourne movies. I'd seen them in theaters, like the first one at least. And I think the Bourne Identity came out before Casino Royale.
2002.
Right. And so when I saw I was expecting, it looked from the trailers and the commercials like I was going to be getting a Bourne Identity sort of situation. And when I went and saw it, it was in terms of emulating the fight scenes, but I don't think that it did in terms of the I get it when people say that they tried to make Bond more like Bourne, but that seemed to be more of just an emulation of the stunt choreography as opposed to emulating the.
Well, yeah, the first movie arguably the most faithful adaptation of a Ian Fleming novel. I mean, yeah, they had to adjust it to modern, a modern setting, but
we'll get to the Texas Hold'em when we get there.
Yeah, we'll get there when we get there. But I just thought it was interesting that since then there's been a tonal shift. They turned Bond into a three-dimensional character. He's got vulnerabilities, emotions. He's not like Daniel Craig. Certainly is not the type of suave, debonair type Bond that you'd seen in the past. He's not the witty type guy who shoots out all these one-liners like Roger Moore. Not the guy who seems happy and loving it all the time like Sean Connery. He's rough around the edges. I find him a bit similar to Timothy Dalton in terms of being rough around the edges. A bit more rougher to the personality, which is good, but not as fantastical as, say, the Brosnan movies, which gives it its own unique tone for this current era. And it seems like something that it works so well in this first movie that they're like, let's stick with it for the rest of the way. But it does color me curious as to how much of this are they going to carry over into the next era? Like, how much is it going to feel really different? Because I felt that when they went from Sean Connery to Roger Moore, that felt substantially different. Like, okay, we know that this guy's more of the witty one-liner guy. He's not as physical, so to speak.
Well, we had a conversation a little while ago, and it was basically headlined by, why are we talking about the next Bond when Daniel Craig is still here? And I'm looking forward to a closing parentheses. Like, I'm looking forward to this being just a chapter of James Bond, and whatever comes next, I'm looking forward to.
Right.
But I'm looking forward to the end of this. This is my Star Trek 6 of James Bond movies for Daniel Craig. This is the encapsulation. And I've even worked headcanon around Daniel Craig James Bond is the same James Bond as all the rest of the James Bond. It's just now you have to imagine which is your favorite, whichever one shows up in the timeline. Like, I do believe that Timothy Dalton's James Bond did Casino Royale. I believe that Roger Moore did Skyfall. Like, I find it in my heart for the canon. And so whatever they move on to in the next place, great. I'm looking forward to it because I'm going to fit that in too, because it's James Bond.
Cool.
And yeah, I know, right?
What I was getting at is that it feels like these movies are substantially different. Like, yes. I don't feel they're trying to follow the formula anymore. It's like we're trying to do our own thing. And I kind of like that to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
But it also makes me wonder how much of that is going to carry over. Like, when I saw Casino Royale for the first time, I had no idea what I was in for because I hadn't read the book at the time. And I was like, wow. I was kind of floored by it. Like, because I didn't mind that it was a complete departure from the formula. It's not about saving the world. It's not a fight to stop the villain from some diabolical plot. It's more of a character study. And they get away with having low stakes because they don't really need it because it's a character study. And it's like, man, I really like this. And so when you move on to like the next iterations, it's some of it's trying to emulate the formula a little bit, but I guess that kind of goes to speak as to where they're going in the future.
Yeah, and I do appreciate the moving forward growth, I guess. And in Casino Royale, I did appreciate. The death of Vesper hit me as much as the death of Tracy. And so I did. And also, I read the book before I saw the movie. It was one of those ones where I raced to read the book before the movie. It was a James Bond movie. It's actually also the first James Bond movie that I wore a suit to the theater for. And it has been a tradition of mine that I always wear a suit to a new James Bond movie. Some ladies find it endearing. Other people think that I'm a weirdo when I order root beer wearing a suit. But yeah, I really enjoy Casino Royale. I was surprised by it. I think it is I think it's one of the most faithful adaptations of novel to movie. I remember sitting in the theater and people saying, "Oh my God, I thought the movie was over. There's a whole half hour." And I was like, "No, this is where the good stuff happens, bitch." It's amazing when Vesper is revealed. It's heartbreaking. Oh my stars. I love Casino Royale so much. I think it is the best James Bond movie. My favorite James Bond movie is License to Kill, and the one that I watch the most is GoldenEye. There you go. So, Kat, do you want to tell us about the plot of Casino Royale?
All right, so the movie begins in Prague at the MI6 section office. It's in black and white. Bond's confronting this section chief who he believes has been selling information on the side. And he's like, "Yeah, M will be fine with you making money on the side, just not doing this." He accurately predicts that his contact is dead. He pulls a gun on Bond and tries to kill him, but Bond's already disarmed him. And this whole scene is intercut with this flashback in a bathroom with Bond just getting a vicious fight with this guy's contact. And it's an
amazing fight.
It is, and I like how they changed the camera timer so it looks kind of fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
When you're actually, it gives it this really grittier type of feel to it, and it's like, man, this tonally feels very different. And it's kind of odd that the guy Dryden is kind of baiting Bond with, "Oh, to be a 00, you got to have 2 kills," and even it's like, "Oh yeah, the second one's considerably easier," and of course Bond shoots him, and I'm thinking,
pew pew.
Why are you taunting him with the fact that it's easier, because that Bond's already killed your contact. He's going to kill you too, but okay. So he shoots him, and I like that they then cut back to the flashback where the thug's getting up off the floor, and Bond does a spin around to shoot him, and it becomes like the gun barrel, and it's like more animated. That was actually really cool, because at first I was like, "Hey, where's my gun barrel?"
Yeah, me too. I was in the same thing. But also, when he shoots Dryden, there is an intercut picture of Dryden's wife and daughter.
Yes, and I was surprised this was that he'd be. I figured they would arrest the guy as opposed to kill him, but okay. So we then have an excellent title sequence, main titles by Daniel Kleinman, designed to look like casinos and cards, and you see silhouettes of all the previous Bond actors getting killed, which I thought was kind of interesting. They have an excellent song.
My Name by Chris Cornell.
Yeah, and it's funny because the whole thing is this. Not only is the song emphasizing on Bond, but the title sequence is too. There's no. Usually, you have a bunch of girls dancing and all that kind of stuff. You don't have any of that this time. It's just all the Bonds, and it's like they're making a point that okay, we're done with this, and we're taking it in a new direction, which I thought was sort of. Because like they make the point where they're killing all the other Bonds, and they're like, okay, time for the new guy sort of thing, which is a little interesting. So then we come out of
this never happened to the other fella.
Yeah, exactly. So we come out of this in Uganda. Mr. White is meeting the members of the Lord's Resistance Army. You see some child soldiers. They got this old camp there. For some reason, they got this American pinball machine, and they're all in this old camp too. And Mr. White, makes the deal with the guy. They bring in the whole convoy. Le Chiffre enters, played by Mads Mikkelsen. Looks very intimidating, kind of a cool customer. He's got his inhaler. And Stephen Abano, the head of this resistance camp, he's sizing up Le Chiffre. He's like, "Yeah, you believe in God, Mr. Le Chiffre?" He's like, "No, I believe in a reasonable rate of return." He's like, "Okay, sold." So he gives him like $100 million of his money. Mm-hmm. And he takes off. Or not 100 million, but like he doesn't have millions for it. So Le Chiffre takes off. Mr. White's kind of happy about it. We then cut to Madagascar, where Bond and a partner of his are watching not a cockfight, but a mongoose and cobra fight.
Just bitching. That's amazing.
It is. It's awesome. So they're all placing bets, and Bond's complaining that his partner keeps touching his earpiece. He's like, "Dude, stop! Stop touching your ear," type of thing. It's apparent they're spying on this
Well,
bomb.
it's a giveaway because it means that they're in contact, and so the bomb maker, he ends up seeing the guy touching his ear, and he's like, "Take your damn fucking stop! Be a professional, you dick!" And he's caught, and so the bomb maker starts running, and then guy who was touching his ear falls into the mongoose cobra pit, and then Bond has to chase after the bomb maker, and it happens for a long time.
It does. His partner falls in the pit and accidentally discharges his gun, and I guess he doesn't bother trying to keep up with the chase after this. So Bond, because he just
I swear to God, the snake got him.
Yeah, probably. So Bond gives chase, and the bomb maker Malaka, is played by Sebastian Foucan, who's the founder of parkour, which is why this just looks awesome. It's surprising the amount of collateral damage Bond is willing to cause to try and catch this guy. He totally hijacks a bulldozer and smashes through a construction site, pisses off the construction workers to the point that they're trying to attack him too. And it culminates, or part of it culminates, about halfway through the chase. They get up on this big crane, and I'm guessing Bond just wants the guy's backpack, because certainly you're not going to be able to arrest the guy and take him in from up here, because that's, as we would learn soon, is the objective, to take him in for questioning, not to kill him. The fact that they did these stunts for real is amazing. They jumped down
Daniel Craig did them.
Yes, and then they end up running through the rest of the building. They break out, and it ends up breaking down into the street. It's a really brutal fight. It does a good bit for character building, because Bond is just totally laser focused and like an animal. Just I'm gonna get this guy. But
he is Kool-Aid Man intense. Do you remember when he punched through the wall?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
you're not gonna give me my Kool-Aid Man joke? Come on.
It's fine. Right. So then he keeps following Malaka over to the embassy.
Mm-hmm.
And Malaka figures he's safe. Bond's not going to follow me in here, but of course he does. He jumps over the fence of the embassy and is like, "Oh man, Bond's actually going to do this." And he makes his way through the building, and he's careful not to kill anybody, but he is pretty aggressive. He goes straight into the main administrator's office and just starts firing guns and stuff. This culminates in another big action bit where Bond is now out in the courtyard. He's got Malaka, but he's cornered. Doesn't look like he's going to get out. So he surrenders Malaka, and he doesn't even say a word. He's just staring straight ahead. And then he pulls out his pistol, shoots Malaka dead, fires a conveniently placed propane tank, which causes a massive explosion, which should have killed and maimed everybody there, but it doesn't. Bond escapes, checks Malaka's backpack, and sees that he's got what looks like a really cheap bomb in there, and a cell phone that has a phone number on it, and it says ellipsis. Yes. Ellipsis. So he takes the phone, and he's happy. We then cut to not MI6. We cut to Parliament, and Emma's coming out.
Wait! Before we move on, is this early Bond shenanigans where he is in sort of an unbridled a buck, if you will? He's just he's off the leash.
For sure, because you could tell that the older Craig Bond from the later movies wouldn't be this reckless. And
can you understand how other people would be like, "No, this isn't necessarily my Bond"? I've found Bond fans who have said that no, James Bond would not be that reckless.
Right, and that's kind of the point in a way, that he's a rookie. He's not really ironed that out yet, so to speak. And so when we meet M, once again played by Judi Dench, which I think was a great decision because she's great at this. So she comes out of the office. She's presumably just had her ass handed to her. She's really pissed off, saying, an agent, like, Bond's such a moron for doing this, and if he had any good sense, he would defect, and that she really misses the Cold War. And it's like, oh, okay, so similar M from the same version that she played in the Brosnan era, but awesome.
No, there was a very distinct difference.
Oh. Well, that's true. She is really pissed off at him. For most of this movie, it seems she's not that happy with him, even though she kind of puts up with it.
I don't know what it is, and I don't think that I'm going to be able to put my finger on it until we watch Skyfall.
All right. So M goes back to her house, finds Bond. It's kind of neat because she goes up the elevator, and the elevator just opens up automatically into her apartment, which is kind of interesting. So she steps aside. She sees Bond there on her laptop. For some reason, M has all this sensitive personal information, or sensitive MI6 data on her personal laptop, which is left open and easily accessible at her house. And Bond has used it to run the phone number, and he verifies where the call was made from the valet station at the Ocean Club in the Bahamas. So he's got his information. M is there, and she's really mad. She's like, "Oh, you got a bloody cheek. How could you do this? Blah, blah, blah. You know, how the hell did you find out where I lived?" And he says, "Oh, I thought the same way I found out your name. I thought M was a randomly assigned code number. Oh, utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed."
Yeah, but what does M stand for?
Olivia Mansfield is her name.
Oh, but I thought it was Mallory.
No, that's in Skyfall. So
damn it.
She's really upset with him, and she has a good reason to be. She slams the newspaper down saying, "Look, we wanted you to question him, not to kill him." And the headline says, MI6 agent kills unarmed prisoner.
No, I'm thinking about Bernard Lee. M stands for Miles.
Yeah, that's a completely different era. So anyway, M slams down the paper.
All right. Tell your story.
Right. So she's understandably really pissed off, and this technically is, I'm not sure if it's a plot hole so much as it's a plot logic issue, because they never really explain how they get out of this, because Bond sort of began his career as a 00, essentially blowing his cover by violating like she says, the one inviolable law that you can violate, which is, going onto the embassy and shooting the place up. And she's seriously considering handing Bond over to them at this point.
Right.
And she's like, "Oh, you better go hide your head in the sand somewhere and think about your future, because I'm seriously about thinking of handing you over. And don't ever break into my house again," which of course you'll later do with Skyfall. But and she sees that he was on her laptop. She sees that the laptop's still open, so she concedes that he's got a lead of some kind. And they never do revisit this point as to how he's going to get out. So that's a little bit of dropping off that plot point. So then we cut to the Bahamas, where we have Lashif's yacht. And his girlfriend Valenka gets out of the water, and she's like totally in silhouette. Oh, and it reminded me like of
the va-va-va-voom.
Well, yeah, and then she gets out, boards the yacht, and Lashif is playing cards with two people, one of which is the actress who played Miss Ling, and You Only Live Twice.
I know, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, nice that they called her back. So they're playing cards, and Lashif starts bleeding from his eye, and he's like, "Oh, weeping blood is just a derangement of the tear duct, nothing sinister." But of course, Mads Mikkelsen is saying it, so of course it sounds really sinister. And he tells the guy that, you only have 17.4% chance of making this straight. So the guy folds. Lashif's bodyguard comes up, and he's like, "Hey, you boss, you need to see this." So they go in the back room, they check the computer, and they see the news story about Malacca being killed at the embassy. Mm-hmm. And she's kind of concerned about it, but he's like, "Give our guests 5 minutes to leave or throw them overboard." So then Bond arrives in the Bahamas. He drives up to the Ocean Club. No sooner than he parks, he's kind of admittedly, it looks like one of the valet agents in a way, the way he's dressed. And so he gets out of the car, hands his car out to valet. He kneels down pretending to tie his shoes so he can spy where the security cameras are. And
that's a good move.
It is.
If you're a spy, that's a great move.
It is. But then this jerk comes up and thinks he's a valet agent. He's like, "Oh, you're going to make me, stand here and make me wait." So he tosses him the keys. And without skipping a beat, Bond is, oh, yes, sir. Sorry, sir. So he takes his Range Rover,
but wait,
drives into the parking lot, smashes it into another car to set off all the alarms to cause a diversion. So that way Bond can sneak into the hotel and into the employee-only section. Where he snoops around into their security tapes and he finds... What?
But the thing is the guy, it's a gold Range Rover.
Yeah.
And he's vaguely dressed like Auric Goldfinger.
True, kind of.
It could either be a sly reference, because obviously we're not going to get a Goldfinger remake out of the Daniel Craig era. And so it's nice to see that, Daniel Craig's James Bond defeated Auric Goldfinger in the Bahamas that one time.
Defeated him by smashing his car. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he goes in the security office. He finds the security tape that has the same date and time from the phone call that he already verified from M's computer. He pops it in, and he sees this guy pull up on the security tape in a DB5, and it's Demetrios, and he answers the phone. So he knows that this is the guy that Malacca was trying to contact. So Bond then goes to the front desk and tells the concierge, "Do you know about Demetrius?" "I can't really tell you." "Well, I kind of nicked the door on this DB5, and they're like, "Oh, if he hasn't noticed, you better not tell him." And he's like, "Oh, but if I felt compelled to tell him." And you could tell that she knows
That's a great line.
It is, and you can tell that she knows he's lying at this point, but she doesn't care because it's Bond. So she's like, "Oh, I'll be happy to." So she tells him what he wants to know. He then goes for a swim, and we see Demetrios' wife riding a horse down the beach. Bond comes out of the water in this weird homage to the Honey Rider thing from Dr. No.
What do you mean weird?
I just thought I remember when they first released this photo as a promotional thing, and somehow it caused all the angry people who didn't think you could be Bond to suddenly stop complaining, and I'm not sure why. But okay, so I just thought it was
no. Let's just hang on, Kat. Hang on. Let's just stop and enjoy the nicer things in life. Like that is as a man, I can look at Daniel Craig as James Bond from when he walked out of the ocean in Casino Royale. I'm like, heavens, I should stop eating bread.
Yeah, I just thought it looked
like this is the thing about James Bond that is James Bond. Men want to be him and women want to be with him.
Yeah, I get that.
It is maintained by this movie and the objectification of James Bond in Casino Royale. Chef's kiss.
Well, yeah, that's very deliberate on the director's part doing the objectification thing. I just thought the blue Speedo was terrible and kind of ruins the look.
It was no worse than the jumper he wore in Goldfinger. Heavens, there have been worse attires.
We're not talking about Goldfinger, though. So anyway.
No, we're talking about James Bond, and he's worn worse things.
Oh, I know. I just thought the blue Speedo was horrible. So anyway.
I thought it was fine.
All right. So he comes out of the water, and he spies Demetrios on the patio of the house. And he's kind of being discreet. And that night, he goes to the casino. Demetrios is playing cards. Bond asks if he can sit in. They're like, "Oh, be our guest." And he's playing cards, and then Solange comes in, Demetrios' wife. She gives Demetrios like a hug and a kiss, and he's like, "If that was for luck, you're 2 hours late." And then the dealer reminds him.
Demetrios is a dick.
He is, and then the dealer even reminds him of what the move is because he wasn't paying attention. He's like, "Yeah, I heard you." So he's like a real jerk, and it's not really clear why he's this much of a jerk right now. It's just, I guess he rolled out of bed on the wrong.
He's a bad guy. We're not supposed to like him.
So Bond is playing card. Oh yeah, and Bond had another run-in with the Goldfinger wannabe at the bar, who kind of looks at him while he's like eating like peanuts or something, and he just kind of, it's like he recognizes him, but he doesn't say anything. So anyway, Bond's playing cards. He cleans out Demetrios, and Demetrios doesn't want to lose, so he's like, here. He throws his keychain on the table. Hey, this is my car because it's got an Aston Martin keychain on it.
It looks like he's playing Monopoly.
It is, and it's not entirely true either because it looked like his was a V12 Aston Martin, not the DB5, which is the one he actually has. But the dealer says, "No, sir, sorry, it's table stakes." And Bond's like, "No, it's okay. Let him get a chance to win his money back." But Bond beats him in the card game anyway. He gets the car. He's taking the chips. He's like, "Oh, and the valet ticket." It's the valet ticket. So Bond gets up to leave, and in another really cool James Bond move, he knows that Demetrios now is upset with his wife, that they're not on his wife, they're having a bad night. He knows he's probably going to be able to get information from her. So what does he do? He goes to the valet to get the car, having no intention to go anywhere, full knowing that Solange is going to think that, oh, he's coming. So Demetrios is coming to get the car. She sees that it's Bond, and she's like, oh, no wonder he's so upset. Which actually no, because he hadn't lost the car at the time he was being a dick to you earlier. But so Bond says, oh, why don't you come to my place for a drink? And she's really nervous. You can tell she doesn't really want to cheat on her husband. And she concedes like one.
I don't really get that sense.
Well, I mean, I don't know, because it's clear that he's trying to pick her up, and she seems to be able to recognize that, and she's got this weird look on her face, like she's hesitant about it, and she's like, one drink. Like, and then she kind of firmly says that, as if she's planting her feet on what she is or isn't willing to do.
They do establish, and this is something that may be coming up shortly, but maybe it's even with Vesper. It's like, you're not my type. What do you mean? And Bond says single. Like, he wants to be involved with involved women.
Yeah, he's still a rookie.
It is an easy getaway. Like, this is a very interesting characterization of James Bond in terms of he is overtly callous. This is an overtly callous James Bond in Daniel Craig, which I had not even thought of. And and you watch some of the special features, or you read or hear some interviews with Roger Moore, and he talks about how James Bond will go and kill, but he doesn't want to. And with Daniel Craig, I'm like, yeah, this guy has no morals.
Yeah, I guess it's okay. I didn't mind that he didn't have any morals because.
Well, no, but I always appreciated the false level of civility, and this is, and
True.
again, like
kind of like he said, he's a spy pretending to be a gentleman.
Yeah, and at this point in the story, he's not even pretending to be a gentleman.
Right. Yes, like he knows Dimitrios is involved with something. He's involved with the chief. It means he's a terrorist. So it's like, screw that. I'm going to go screw his wife. Why not? So they get in the car and he drives off to supposedly take her back to his house, but instead he just does a loop back to the valet station. And
it is a good move.
It is a good move. And she figures it out and even appreciates it and kind of laughs it off.
So he bangs her.
Well, before that, we briefly cut back to Le Chiffre's yacht where Dimitrios goes to see him. And he's like, Dimitrios is like, I have a hard time seeing how this is my fault. And she's like, well, he was your man. It's like, oh, well, Dimitrios like, it's your plan, but I got another guy. He's ready to go as long as you got the money. And he's like, oh, okay. So then we cut back to Bond's apartment, his room or whatever that it's actually it's like a bungalow house that's actually at the real Ocean Club in the Bahamas. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it looks amazing. I wish I could go there. I wish I could afford it.
Yeah, so he and Solange are having a great time. They're sleeping together. He asks her, can I ask you a personal question? And he says, oh, does the name Ellipsis mean anything to you? And she's like, no. And the phone rings. It's Dimitrios. She talks with him briefly, and she's like, oh, apparently he's on the last flight to Miami. So Bond's like, oh, in that case, we should order some more champagne. And so she gets up to go, presumably to the bathroom or whatever. He calls the front desk and calls room service, and he asks for a Bollinger and some beluga caviar. They're like, how many, sir? For two? No, for one.
For one.
He slams the phone down. And I love this because it's like, he could stay there, like the older Bond, like maybe the Roger Moore Bond or the Dalton Bond or even the Connery Bond to an extent would put the mission on hold because like Connery says, oh, I'll be there in an hour, or maybe in an hour. Like Dalton, when he's on the yacht at the end of the pre-title sequence of Living Daylights and he reports what's happened, and he's like, I'll be there in an hour or make it two or whatever. But this Bond is not going to do that. He's, like you mentioned, he's kind of callous in that way. He's setting this girl up for like a nice drink. They're gonna have a nice night, but now he just totally abandons her and doesn't even tell her where he's going.
Well, he also just had sex.
Right. So he leaves, and this is actually an interesting transition. This is an interesting transition where you see him driving away in the DB5, and then it cuts to him in the back of a cab already in Miami on the freeway. And I'm like, I that kind of took me aback for a second because they're not at the airport. They didn't fly. It's like, wait, how did they get here? So yeah, so that was like a big jump from him having to go to the airport, get on the flight, tail Dimitrios out of the airport, because apparently, even though Dimitrios is meeting Carlos, is disguised as airport security, or will be disguised as that, rather than just doing a sleight of hand to hand off at the airport, they decide to do something else where Dimitrios goes to this museum and he checks the bag in at the front desk. The bag presumably has the bomb in there. Mm-hmm. He then goes further into the hotel casino, this museum place, wherever they are. I know they filmed it in Prague at this special museum.
Oh, are you talking about like the human people exhibit?
Yes. The body. Yes. So Dimitrios goes in there and he sets the luggage key down on the table in the center of the exhibit. Bond sees him do this and tries to follow him around, but Dimitrios kind of sneaks up behind him with a knife. Bond is not even remotely fazed by it. He just quietly spins around and grabs the knife. They're then both fighting over the knife back and forth, and Bond ends up winning, stabbing him in the chest.
Which is awesome.
It's awesome. He dies pretty quickly, surprisingly, for a gut punch. Bond sits him down in a chair.
We are talking about a franchise that does karate chops to the neck.
Yeah, so he turns around, and he sees that the key is gone. And he's like, oh, shit. So he runs back towards the front desk, and he sees that the bag is gone. And now the music is starting to really pick up as we enter another great action scene. So
Still no James Bond theme whatsoever in this movie.
So he runs outside, and he's looking around, can't see where the guy is. So he gets the phone out because he still has the number there. He dials it, sees the guy pick it up. He gives chase. He's unfortunately unable to stop him there because he'd already gotten in the back of a cab. So he follows him back to the airport, goes through airport security. There's an odd cameo by Richard Branson of all people going through the security checkpoint.
I heard he went to space.
I did. Sort of. So then, so Bond gets to the check stand and he goes over to this book stand and he's pretending to look at the books while he's spying on Carlos. And Carlos gets these sunglasses and he notices Bond. And strangely, Bond and him lock eye contact, which sort of means like, okay, the stealth part of this is over, but Bond still remains quiet. And it's like, the guy's likely got a bomb. And we're at an airport in post 9/11 world, and you're not going to shout to security or whatever. You're just going to hope that this works out. Okay.
Well, that's how the movie happens.
Yeah. So the guy gets Carlos gets
calm down, Milhouse.
Carlos gets into the security only doorway. Bond gets up there and he calls Villiers, who's M's secretary. I don't know why they didn't just have this character be Bill Tanner, and he's actually named after one of the actors who played Bill Tanner in Fear Eyes Only.
Right.
So Villiers answers the phone, and Bond tells him what's going on, and he's really urgent about it. And Villiers is like, "Oh, well, maybe she might have to call you back." I'm like, "Are you kidding?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to put you on hold." And Bond's like, "Oh, I thought you might," which is a little weird because we're in the middle of this tense kind of pursuit.
Yeah, but this entire scene culminates in nothing. Bond already has the answer. He knows how to get in. He has ellipsis. The entire reason for this scene is to show how important. We just want to remind the audience James Bond is still a spy. He is still doing things. He still does have a boss. But as soon as he gets in touch with his boss, I'll call you back, click.
Right.
I'm doing my job.
He seemed to be absent-minded a bit there and forgetting that he had the name on the number. So he looks it up again, ellipsis. He punches in the code on the key code to get through the employee only section. Carlos, meanwhile, activates the sprinkler system. So that causes a bunch of panic. Presumably the fire alarms are going off. Everybody's trying to flee the airport. The security's distracted. You have the fire department showing up. So this provides perfect cover for Carlos to get out onto the tarmac undetected. Bond starts running down the stairs to catch up with him. M calls Bond back, and they figured out that the target is Skyfleet.
Yes.
Which reminds me that I forgot to mention that Lashif put a bunch of put options against Skyfleet earlier.
Well, that's the whole thing. Is he's trying to double his money from the money that he got from the thing with the stuff and the guys in the rainforest.
The people that he got the money from the LRA, and he's investing it by betting against this company Skyfleet, whose stock is expected to skyrocket.
And he's going to blow up the plane, and that's going to make his money like triple or quadruple or just lots of money.
He took the LRA's money to bet against Skyfleet, the stock, because he's going to blow up their brand new prototype airplane, meaning that he's going to make a bunch of money.
And you know what? It's a good plan. I am a financial advisor, and if you have any money, I would recommend you blowing up a plane and investing on the people who own that plane.
Except it would look very, very suspicious the next day.
Well, I'm not a good financial advisor.
Okay. So Bond ends up... this is another funny thing. When M calls him and tells him what the target is, he sees Carlos walking along, and Bond's like, "I gotta go." So he hangs up the phone, gives chase. Carlos goes over to one of the fuel tankers for the planes, and he snaps the neck of the driver, and he takes out this bomb, which is a really tiny looking thing, no bigger than like a little pen light, and he hooks it on like the little grapple to the stairwell or whatever on the little steps to get in the car. So he starts driving, and he's intending to drive all the way to where the hangar is, where the Skyfleet plane and this.
It was going to be attached to a gas.
Right. I just meant that the bomb itself looked really tiny. So
it doesn't take a whole heck of a lot to blow up a gasoline truck.
Much smaller than the one Malacca was using, which was like this big, almost Wile E. Coyote type thing. So yeah, that was pretty funny. So this big hangar opens, and you see the Skyfleet plane. It's a gorgeous shot. For some reason, there's people standing around in lab coats, like they're taking notes as the plane is being taxied out. Bond is now being pursued by airport security because I assume they've noted, again, the airport security is, excellent post 9/11 world and all that. So they probably saw him sneak into the security doorway where he wasn't supposed to go. So Bond starts running, and he gets on one of those stairwells that they, wheel over to the plane, and he uses that to jump on top of the fuel truck. And this leads into a great chase. The police are chasing him now. An airplane which has to abort a takeoff ends up blasting some of the cop cars because of the blowback from the engines.
Oh, and it looks amazing. They all flip and flopple.
It does. And the fuel truck breaks through a shuttle bus, which causes an explosion, but not one to blow up the fuel tank. Bond gets inside, but does destroy the windshield. So Bond swings in. He starts fighting the guy. He kicks Bond out of the car. He kind of falls over and sees the bomb with his hand. So he grabs it, unhooks it, keeps fighting this guy. They're getting closer to the plane, and Carlos eventually attempts to jump out, and Bond reaches over and grabs his belt. And we know exactly what he's going to do.
I didn't at the time.
Oh, I noticed the insert. I'm like, oh, okay, I see this. So Carlos successfully jumps out of the car. The brakes, for some reason, don't work anymore, probably from when they hit the shuttle bus. So Bond, at this point, who actually looks really disheveled, he's not like the super confident Bond. This is one of the things I like about him. You can actually, the vulnerabilities of him, and he can't hit the brakes, so he veers the steering wheel hard left, swerves the thing to a stop. At this point, there's a bunch of bullet holes in the tanker, so it's been spilling gasoline everywhere. And when the truck comes to a stop, Bond is just kind of frozen for a second, because he's really shaken by this. He steps out, and finally the airport security shows up with all their shotguns and handcuffs. They tie him up. They frisk him against a cop car.
Now, okay, if I may interject for just 1 second, we are going to be talking about all of the Daniel Craig movies. And in, oh my God, Spectre? Is it Spectre where they have the long shot at the beginning? The dead live? That's Spectre, right? Okay. So with that, when Daniel Craig, when he is surprised by his success, I am always so happy.
Right.
And this is the first instance of him being surprised by his success. And there is an evolution of him being surprised by his success. This is him panicking. And as you watch the movies going forward, and I'm sure I'll point them out as we watch all these movies, is he starts to be like, holy shit, I can't believe it. This is the one where it's like, holy shit, I can't believe it. But as you move forward, he's like, really? And I enjoy it when James Bond enjoys winning. And this is, I understand what they were going for, but this is definitely a situation where I was like, I could use some levity. And the levity comes when he blows the guy up.
Right, and that doesn't make sense either, because the bomb, ever since he activated, has been beeping like crazy. So he should have heard the thing beeping on his belt. So that's not really clear why. But so Bond, and I love how they don't show the guy actually
blow up. We were waiting for the murder to be funny.
Right, and they don't show him actually blow up. The camera instead zooms in on Bond when he gives this wry smile, which is awesome.
And the wry smile is awesome.
Yes, yeah. We immediately cut to the next morning. Lashif's talking to his stockbroker. He's like, I'm not sure how much you lost. He's like, $101,206,000, and he's upset. Hangs up on his stockbroker, and he's like, somebody talked. So then we cut to Bond arriving back at Dimitrios' house in the Bahamas in a helicopter. Valiers is with him. M's following shortly behind. You have a whole team of MI6 people, presumably, checking out the house because, Dimitrios is a arms dealer. So, of course, they're going to find as much information as they can. He goes into the backyard. He finds Solange.
He can't drive anymore. He doesn't have a car.
Yeah, so he goes to the back and he finds Solange tangled up in the hammock. Yes. And either she was strangled or she was drowned. I'm not really sure.
She was murdered. She was flat out murdered.
Yeah, I know she was murdered. I'm just not sure how it happened. I know that she did it. So M is there, and she's kind of, quite the body count you're racking up. And she's still, it's like, I presume that M had to be, is that the only reason M is here, she probably had to go to Miami personally to get Bond out of jail, which is like a good, in this case, it's a good international incident because he thwarted a terrorist attack. So maybe that gives him some goodwill. It wouldn't give him goodwill to Madagascar, but okay. So she's kind of fed up with him, and she tells him that, Dimitrios is an arms dealer. He's tied with a sheep. He's lost a lot of money, and he's put together this high stakes poker game at Casino Royale. And this agent comes forward and he injects Bond with this tracking device. And it's interesting to see the evolution of these tracking devices over the years. Like in Goldfinger, it was like a little actual tracker that goes in his shoe. And Thunderball, it was like a radioactive pill that he swallows. This movie, he's got the chip that actually goes into his wrist. And then in Spectre, he'll end up in Skyfall, they regress it.
I like his reaction to that too, when they just inject it into him and he's like, ow.
Yeah.
It's you son of a bitch, you could have warned me. This is gonna hurt.
Right. So and then eventually Inspector. So they go to right. He has the microchip in Goldfinger, the radioactive pill in Thunderball. This thing in Casino Royale. They regress to a little radio in Skyfall, and then they advance to Smart Blood Inspector. So this technology is all over the place, which is kind of surprising. And M, of course, is kind of being really catty with him because Bond's like, "Oh, is this to keep a watch on me?" And she's like, "Yes."
Mm-hmm.
And she tells him that that when 9/11 happened, the airline stocks all hit rock bottom, but somebody made a bunch of money betting the other way. And I'm thinking, okay, so you just implied that Lashif played a hand in that, or at the very least he knew about it. Which is
but that makes sense. That makes a credible villain. Like I enjoy, and also isn't Lashif like isn't that in your top 3 of all time villains?
Yeah, he's top 1, and I like that he's actually done this. But again, at least it's something else.
So I appreciate what he's done.
Right, and it's kind of interesting because earlier when Valiers was updating M as to what Bond was even doing in the Bahamas in the first place, and she's like, how the hell does he know these things? All about it. She opened because she said you woke me to share his holiday plans, but she opened her computer and it showed that there was an actual file on the sheaf, like Interpol. So you couple this with the fact that he's supposedly involved in 9/11 and the intelligence community suspects that, coupled with the fact that he just tried to commit another terrorist attack at an airport, then I would think that since they know exactly where he's going to be, that they would just send Interpol agents there to arrest him. Because
no, but part of the reason that they want to do this convoluted plot is, and correct me if I'm wrong, they want to bankrupt Lashif so that they can get all of the people. It sort of feeds in from the beginning. Yes, you killed one bomb maker, but we want the person who is paying him to make the bombs. And so with Lashif, it does extrapolate throughout the story is that Lashif is still middle management. And so we don't want the people who we don't want Lashif. We want the people who are paying
right,
Lashif.
But Lashif is effectively already bankrupt because he just lost $100 million, which he doesn't have to lose.
Well, let's do it more. Send in James Bond. He can play Texas Hold'em.
Yeah, that's the only real major plot gripe I have with the movie, because in the book, what Lashif did was he was a banker for Smersh, and he invested their money in a bunch of brothels, but then prostitution was outlawed, so he wasn't under any specific pressure at the time. He just had to get the money back, so so it made sense that the MI6 or whatever wasn't really breathing down his neck. Whereas in this case, I just feel that the CIA, which we know has a head up on Lashif, and MI6 is like, okay, we know what this guy's been involved in. We know where he's going to be and what he's doing. He's just lost all this money he doesn't have to lose. But we're going to entertain the card game anyway. That's my one little gripe about this movie, which is pretty good. I only have one gripe about it.
They want to capture him of his own volition. That is my understanding of the plot of both the CIA and MI6.
Okay, so Bond, because he's apparently MI6's best card player, M decides to send him to
play. And also Felix Leiter is the best card player in the CIA.
I'll get to that later too. So we cut to Montenegro. Bond's on the train and he meets Vesper, who is the MI6 Treasury agent who's been assigned to the case.
And one of the hottest women to ever walk the earth. Thank you, Eva Green.
Okay, so she and Bond have excellent chemistry. Probably some of the best.
You disagree?
What?
Or am I just being too va-va-va-voom?
She's okay. I like her.
Well, is she one of your favorite Bond girls or not?
Yeah, I think she's in my top 5.
Okay.
I have to check the rankings again.
But please continue. I'm sorry for interrupting.
That's cool. So I like that they have this really catty back and forth. Like when Bond insinuates that they have a plan, she's like, wait, there's a plan? I thought we were just risking millions of dollars and hundreds and if not thousands of lives on a game of luck. And so they size each other up and determine that each other are orphans, and they're kind of connecting on that. And she's trying her best not to be impressed by Bond, even though, and she's trying her best at that. She's doing a pretty decent job at trying to hide it, which is kind of an interesting back and forth they have throughout.
Oh, that is a very interesting difference of opinion that we have. I don't think that she's impressed.
I don't think that's what I mean. I don't think she's impressed either, but she must have picked up on something, because it doesn't take long before they start, falling for each other.
Wait, no, you are, no. They do not fall for one another until they both commit murder together.
I know, but that's like the next day.
But until then, no, they don't like each other.
Well, he kind of likes her. He's just not. I mean, not in a romantic
He
way.
will do anybody.
No, I meant that he's being polite and stuff. It's not like he's just putting on an act. He kind of enjoys her company. So anyway, they have this.
You don't like Tracy, and you like Vesper, and it makes me angry.
I liked Tracy. I just didn't like the way the character was used.
I know.
So anyway, they
Keep
arrive at
going, please.
Yes, so they arrive at the hotel, the Grand Pub Hotel. They take in the car. They get their car to ride over there, and Bond is trying to be catty with her again, and he's reading off that their covers. He's like, "Oh, I'm Mr. James Beach, and you're Miss Stephanie Broadchest." He's like, "I am not," and she tries to grab the papers. He's like, "You're gonna have to trust me on this." So they're having their fun back and forth. They check in at the hotel.
It was such a great line.
He tells the concierge that James Bond, but the reservation's under Beach, and she's kind of upset by that. And he's like, "Look, if Lashif's desperate enough, he's gonna play me anyway, even if he finds out I'm James Bond. So if I play under a code name, whatever, we already know he wants to play this game. But if he still wants to play upon finding out that I am here, then that tells me something about him, which is good because he's being, again, a smart spy." They're going to go up to their separate rooms, but Vesper's like, "No, there's not enough room in here for you and your ego." So she goes up the elevator by herself. Bond kind of smiles because he does find this a bit funny. The concierge has a package for him, and that's the keys to his Aston Martin V12. He goes, and this is just like a normal car. It's not like a tricked out Q branch car or anything. It does have a defibrillator and a gun underneath the glove box, though. So he checks
Which
that
will
out.
come in useful later.
Yes. So then Bond and Vesper go down to this street cafe to meet Mathis, who's the MI6 contact there.
I love Mathis.
He's played by Giancarlo Giannini. He's a great actor, and I like that.
First time I ever saw him was in Hannibal.
Yeah.
But
like
yeah, no, absolutely great. And he was done dirty both movies.
Yeah, I like that in this film, the way he's introduced. I could totally believe that in his younger years he would have been like the Italian James Bond, you know? Like he's just that cool, and he's trying to impress Bond, and he's like, "Oh, you're here the finance. Oh, I have no problem with your, account. I have no problem with accounts. I think they're lovely people." And he's talking about how, Lashif doesn't really know we're watching him yet because I'm the only one who's watching them. And he says, "I thought about maybe bribing the police chief to help us out with this, but then I realized it'd be cheaper to just frame him with Photoshop and bribe the deputy of police to arrest him." So, and this is where Michael G. Wilson has his cameo. He, of course, has a cameo in every Bond movie since Goldfinger. And so he's the police.
Really? Heavens.
Yes. Yeah, he was actually one of the guys dressed up in the fake military uniforms when Goldfinger's breaking into Fort Knox.
I think I read that. Yes, we should start paying attention to the Michael G. Wilson cameos.
Yes. So it's funny because when the cops come to arrest him, you would think that if you're the police chief and you were being arrested for something which you're innocent of is completely absurd, that you'd be a bit more upset. But no, he's very cordial. He stands up. He's like, "Oh, no, you don't have to cuff me. I'm coming." I thought that was kind of funny. So they've taken care of that guy.
But we're talking about like this is a dictatorial country, right?
Yes, because it's Montenegro.
So if someone shows up and says you're under arrest and you're coming with me,
you actually see
this can make that happen.
In fact, you actually see when Bond was driving up to go and meet Mathis, there were these two guys dressed in almost like military police who had assault rifles walking down the street in this really quaint town. So you're right. This is it is Montenegro, given all the political situation there. Maybe that's why Lashif felt safe playing this game here, as opposed to, like in Prague where they actually filmed it. So Bond goes back to the hotel. He and Vesper are getting ready that night. Bond gets out his dinner jacket and he's going to put it on, but then he sees that there's a freshly pressed one. And there's an interesting music beat here, almost like something sinister is about to happen. And instead he just bounces back in the bathroom to ask Vesper, "What's this?" And she's like, "There are dinner jackets, and then there are dinner jackets. That is the latter." And he's like, but it's tailored. He's like, "I sized you up the minute I saw you," which is great. So he accepts that. He puts on the tux for the first time, and we see him stepping in front of the bathroom mirror, and they're playing the Casino Royale theme. They're still not leaning into the Bond theme.
No, it is still "You Know My Name."
Yes, it's still "You Know My Name." And I think that's really good and very clever of the script to do that.
Yes.
So then he and Vesper go over to the casino. She actually gives him a look, and he gives her a look back. It's kind of fun. So they go to the casino, the exterior of which they used for this administrative building in Prague, which is gorgeous. The interior, where the main casino floor is, where you have all the members of the general public or whatever, the non-VIP section, that was also built inside this abandoned administrative building. Whereas the actual VIP section where they play the game is built on stage at Barrendorf Studios, which is kind of neat. And this room, this set that they built, I absolutely love it. The way that where the table is placed, where the windows are as opposed to the doors, the color scheme versus the table and the outfits everybody's wearing. This is one of my favorite sets, and it's not like outlandish type of set. It's a bit minimalist. I love it. So it comes in there, and Lashif immediately.
Which set? Sorry, I was moving around.
The poker table where they're going to play the game.
Oh no! It's ostentatious and it's amazing in terms of seeing the arena in which these people are going to gamble.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, okay, so and also speaking of the gambling, do you feel like it was a little bit of a dumbing down or a lot of a dumbing down in terms of the baccarat?
I was told, or not told, but I was watching a review about this, and according to this guy's like a poker expert, he said virtually every move that, not just in this game, poker game, but even the game earlier in the movie on Lashif's yacht and with Demetrios, he says every move the players made was the only logical move that like even a novice poker player would make.
That's interesting.
And so they're kind of dumbing it down. That kind of like when the dealer throughout the game also calls out all the plays, which doesn't happen. The fact that Mathis sums up what's going on to Vesper as if she needs to be told, which is, of course, breaking the fourth wall to inform the audience as to what's going on. And I was kind of fine with that because I remember I won my first game of poker on a Royal Flush 10 years ago, but I don't remember how to play. so anyway.
Have you ever played golf?
Yeah.
Have you ever got a hole in one?
No.
All right. Me either.
Okay. So Bond, no sooner than he walks into this room to play this game, Lashif immediately introduces himself. He's like, "Oh, hello, Mr. Bond," or "Is that Mr. Beach? I'm confused." Bond's like, "Oh, we wouldn't want that, would we?" And he just leaves Lashif hanging there, and Lashif is kind of like, okay. So Bond goes to the bar. He greets Mathis. Felix is there standing next to him, but we haven't been told it's Felix yet. Played by Jeffrey Wright, who's of course awesome.
Yeah.
So then in comes...
I like him better in Quantum of Solace than I do in this.
Yeah. So then in comes Mr. Mendel, who's this really jovial guy who's going to be managing the game. He asks... Yeah,
Mr. Mendel?
Yeah, Mr. Yeah, so Mr. Mendel comes in, and he's like, "Oh, Mr. Bond, we proceed in alphabetical order. Will you please enter your password?" So Bond enters a password, and he actually pauses to think about this. Funny, you would have thought he would have thought of a password before he showed up to the game, but he has to pause to think about it. He types in his password. The account
number. And what is the password?
Vesper, which is going to be funny later on. So he enters the
Not funny, tragic.
Well, yes, but I'll tell you why it's funny later on when we get there. So he enters the password, and then we get to the first round of the game. And the first round goes rather well. And I love the way Martin Campbell directs these scenes because, again, he knows that not everybody watching is going to be familiar with poker or what it means. But he does make sure to have close-up shots on all the cards so the people who do know how to play poker know what's going on. Right. And the actors, of course, totally sell it. So you can follow the game relatively easily. And, yeah, you have Mathis is kind of off on the side watching, and Vesper shows up a little bit into this game. And, she gives Bond a hug and kisses him because he wanted her to, distract everybody at the table, which works because she walks over to the mini bar, and Mathis is like, "Oh, it works, blah, blah." So they keep playing cards, and Bond notices that Lashif kind of has a tell. He's kind of, going like this. He's worrying. He's kind of bluffing.
Well, his eye bleeds. It's kind of a tell.
His eye didn't bleed in this first round.
I know. I'm sorry. I was making a joke. Stop being so.
Oh, okay. So that's going on. All right. Yeah. So Lashif wins the first round on a bluff. Bond goes to the mini bar and tells Lashif he tells Mathis and Vesper this, and she's like, "Bluffing. He had the best hand." He's like, "Which he got the best cards, which he got on the last hand." So this proves to be a bad decision for Bond to tell her, and because of reasons. So, which we'll get to later when we get there. So they go back to sit down to play some more cards, and we have an interesting transition where the guy who's managing the game, he's like, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we've been playing for 4 hours. Time to take a short break. We will resume play in 1 hour." I'm like, damn, this is a long poker game. So
cut to action scene.
Yes, so Lashif gets back to his room. We see that his girlfriend is with him on the balcony. He's like, "What's so damn important?" And she immediately starts kissing him. And then what is admittedly a pretty good jump scare. Stephen Abano from the LRA shows up and immediately starts garroting Lashif and his other guys there and starts grabbing Valenka. He's like, "You think you can lose that kind of money and no one would notice?"
Yeah.
He's like really angry about it. He pulls out a machete And he says, I would take a hand for this betrayal, but you need it to play cards. So
but this is something that is in the book and also
yes.
in the movie, and this is why I appreciate Casino Royale as being one of the best adaptations of a book.
Yes.
Is that the antagonist, Le Chiffre, is in as much danger, if not more, than
Yes.
James Bond, and so there are bad guys over Le Chiffre who are gonna fuck him up. And he is fighting for his life, and James Bond is like trying to, like, it's very
yeah, it is.
there are so many psychological things going on in this, and when I read, and again, I read this book before I saw the movie, and when I saw the movie, I was like, this is the best thing ever. There's only been one other time, and it was when I read Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas before I saw the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. But this movie is the perfect adaptation of a novel, in my opinion. Continue on with the movie, Catherine.
So Bond and Vesper come out of the elevator. They happen to have the room on the same floor Le Chiffre does. Well, he was already going to go there anyway because he planted a tracking device on Le Chiffre's inhaler, which he was really lucky that Le Chiffre kind of forgot the inhaler for a second. Yeah, he plans. Yeah, Le Chiffre at the end of the round, he stood up and he accidentally left his inhaler on the table, and Bond sneaks the tracker there.
Oh, right.
Yes. So, the guy's like, Bono says, I would take a hand for this betrayal, but you need it to play cards. So then he turns to his girlfriend, Valenka, or Le Chiffre's girlfriend, and he's like, oh, I would, hold out your hand, or hold out your arm, I'll take your head. So his guard forces her arm out, and she screams. Bond and Vesper hear this. He tells Vesper to get in the elevator, but the elevator doors close. So then he's like, oh, take the stairs. And so she goes to take the stairs, and then Obano goes in for what you think he's actually going to do it. He swings it down, and he stops at the last second, like a few centimeters away. And he turns over to Le Chiffre, who's not said a word, and who still looks petrified, by the way.
Yeah.
And he's like, not a word of protest. Man, you should really find another boyfriend, which is true.
Yeah.
He leaves. So Obano leaves with his henchman, and I still wanted.
And that's the thing, is that the bad guy establishes that the bad guy in the movie is worse than the bad guy trying to kill the bad guy. Like, it does. Everything about this movie establishes that Le Chiffre is a fucking cum stain. Like, he is an absolute the worst. And
yes,
so
and that's why when the door shut, I kind of wanted more so to go back in the room to see what that conversation was like between Le Chiffre and his girlfriend. But instead, we follow.
Yeah, well,
yes,
I assume she left.
No, we'll get to that later. So,
okay.
So Obano and the agent are walking down, or the bodyguard, they're like walking down the aisle, and in a callback to the whole "don't touch your ear" thing in the beginning of the movie, he sees that Bond's got an earpiece while he's making out with Vesper as a distraction. And this guy spins around, fires a gun, very loud gunshot. You see Obano pull out his machete, which for some reason I always get a laugh out of that, because you see these very well-dressed guys. One guy pulls out a gun. But
I like a well-dressed man with a machete.
Oh, no, I think it's great. I just always laugh.
Yeah, it looks cool.
It's such a striking, odd image that, get out his machete. So they go into the stairwell, and Bond grabs the first guy and immediately throws him over the railing. So that guy's done.
This is a great action scene.
It is. And this action scene, what I love about it is that it's not only brutal, but it doesn't have a bunch of cuts in it. It's like the camera just follows them down each flight of stairs. There's one awkward shot where Obano kicks Bond, and it goes slow motion for a second as Bond's kind of falling back against the wall, which I thought was interesting. He jumps down to try and kill him. Bond kicks the machete out of the guy's hand, and it swipes down the stairs and almost hits Vesper. And he had, by the way, had already used the machete to knock Bond's gun out of his hand. So this fight keeps going on brutal all the way down the stairs until they get about 2 flights up. That's when Bond puts Obano kind of in a chokehold. They both fall over onto the ground. He keeps trying to choke.
This is where the majority of the murder happens.
Yes, Obano reaches for his gun. Vesper runs in to help and starts smashing his wrist on the ground to get him to let go, which causes the gun to discharge. So it fires, and then Bond eventually finishes the job. So the guy's been throttled.
Murders the man.
Yes, he murders. That's why he's finishing the job. He murders the guy. He's covered in blood.
You seem very sensitive when we discuss the murder.
Yes, Vesper's really shaken, and he tells her to go get Mathis. He's like, go.
As you would be, being a witness to murder.
Yes, so she goes back upstairs to do that. Bond goes back to their hotel room. He's in the bathroom. He takes the clothes off. He's washing it. And I like that he's not being the total suave, confident Bond. He's like, you can tell he's really been through the ringer on this. So he cleans himself up and he gets dressed again and he goes back to sit at the poker table for round 2. And to your point about Lashif just being a total jackass, of course, Lashif knows what happened. He had to have heard that. Never mind the fact that nobody else in the hotel heard it, which I admit is a little weird. But Lashif had to know that Bond just killed this guy. He's sitting there, and Lashif's like, "You changed your shirt, Mr. Bond. I hope our game isn't causing you to perspire." And I'm like, what a dick. He just saved your life, basically. Because even though Abano was right that Lashif needs his hands to play cards, I'm pretty sure he needs peace of mind to play cards as well, which Abano robbed him of by breaking into his hotel room. So now that Abano's dead, Lashif can be a little bit more confident now as he goes forward playing his game. And Bond just kind of smiles in reply. And then you hear the dealer say, or not the dealer, but the guy announcing it's the game. He's like, okay, now we're ready for round 2. And we actually don't get to see round 2. It cuts straight back to Bond's room. He walks in and he sees a broken wine glass. You have a great close-up on that. He's kind of worried. You hear the shower going. And he steps quietly into the bathroom, and you see Vesper still in her dress. Apparently the producers wanted her in her underwear. And Daniel Craig's like, no, that doesn't make any sense, which he's right. So that was a good decision. So she's sitting there in her dress in the shower, and the shower's on. And Bond actually, the look on his face, he's pretty shocked when he sees this. So he goes in and sits down in the shower with her, and she doesn't actually look at him. She just kind of grabs onto his arm, and she says that it's like, I can't get the blood. There's blood on my hands, and I can't get it off. So then
I do think that Daniel Craig cradles Vesper.
He does. And she says
Eva Green is, and I think that it is a beautiful scene. And I would say I was taken aback by that scene when I first saw it because I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't understand it.
I got it because she's like,
well, no, but and I'm just talking about me.
Yeah.
When I saw the emotion of a man having shared a murder with a lady, and then he sucks her fingers, I was like, well, this is weird. And then it's not until I actually broke it down and thought about the emotions that were involved in that action. And also, I hate to be a book snob, but having read the book and knowing the betrayal that was coming, and that, like, everything about this movie, I think that Casino Royale doesn't get as much credit as it deserves, although it gets a lot of credit. But I think, like, this movie is better than Skyfall.
Yeah. So they're in the shower, and he asks her if she's cold. She says yes. So he turns the water on to hot, and they sit there in the shower, kind of cradling each other for a while. It then cuts to the next morning. Bond's just finished getting dressed, and they make it clear that they did not sleep together, which is good. Which the older era Bonds. What?
Nothing.
Yeah. So they make it clear that they didn't sleep together. He goes out onto the balcony, and he's talking to Mathis, and you see Lashif's bodyguard standing outside his car. The cops are already surrounding him, and Mathis is like, oh, I got this handled, being totally cool. So the cops check the trunk as they hear a phone ringing because Mathis pressed the dial button on his phone. So they pop the trunk, and they see Stephen Abano and his bodyguard dead in Lashif's bodyguard's the trunk of his car. So they arrest him, and Mathis is like, this will throw Lashif off his guard, whatever. And so Mathis is like, how's Vesper? And he's like, it's kind of fine. And then we cut to, we see Lashif is watching this as well. Now he's finally starting to weep blood. And we can tell he's kind of getting worried again.
Can I interrupt you for just 1 second?
Yeah.
Who do you like better? Lashif or sorry, not Lashif. Oh my God, what's his name? The guy.
From what?
This movie.
Mr. White?
Mathis.
Oh, Mathis?
So Mathis or helper guy from Russia with Love.
Oh, Pedro. Karen Bay is
Karen Bay or Mathis.
Karen Bay.
Okay.
And
what about? Oh, there are so many people, but okay. So Mathis falls into the same category as Karen Bay, though.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree?
Does he fall into the same? Yeah, he's kind of like a helper because he's basically the same thing. He's the MI6 section chief or the guy there who he's teamed with. So it's the same type of role.
I really like Mathis.
I do. I feel that he's channeling the Karen Bay thing. So we go. So that night they go back to play the next round of poker. Lashif once again tries to use the bluff, but he uses the bluff this time. It works because he tricks Bond, because Bond thinks, oh, he's bluffing again. So Bond bets all this money and it doesn't work. He loses it all. And he's kind of upset by that. He goes out onto the balcony and there's this.
And then Felix shows up.
Well, not yet. No, because he's out on the balcony. He's striking a pose, and Vesper goes out to meet him, and she's really nervous. And we don't really know why, because she's like, just take me back in the game. I got it. She's like, sorry, I can't do that, James. He's like, sorry. And he grabs her. He's like, you want to put that in a sentence? Like, sorry, Lashif's going to win and keep terrorizing people. And she's like, oh, you lost because of your ego. You're just going to continue to lose. And he gets...
Valid point.
Yeah, and so she's like, I'll let go of me. And she leaves, and Bond is kind of upset. That reminds me, I did forget to mention, I knew I forgot something. During the first round, he actually Bond made a point of making this ridiculously complicated martini order, which everybody else eventually picks up because he wanted Lashif to see that he could totally have his cool. And so I thought that was funny because once Vesper doesn't want to stake him back in the game, Bond goes into the main the casino area at the bar, and he orders a martini, and the guy's like, oh, shaken or stirred? Does it look like I give a damn? Because it just shows he didn't care about having the specialty drink. He just wanted to show Lashif that he had it. So he sees Lashif then he spots Lashif on the other side of the casino, and he's with his girlfriend still. So this relationship that Lashif has with his girlfriend must just be based on money and sex. Because really, Obano was right. He didn't say a word in protest when he was about to chop off her arm, and she's still with him. Okay. So Lashif's confident.
Yeah, Pat, I haven't met a lot of, I don't know. I haven't met a lot of people who would actually beat a man. I've never met a person who would inflict torture.
Yeah.
Have you?
No. So
when it comes to the people who would hang out with Lashif, I'm not one of them.
Right. So Bond and so he's kind of pissed off at this point because he sees Lashif's happy because he's won all this money. So Bond just grabs a knife off the table. Mathis sees James and he's like, get the girl out. And Bond's following Lashif. He's heading down the stairs, and then Felix stops him. Finally introduces himself, and he's like, look, you're not buying back in? And he's like, no. And he's like, look, I'm bleeding chips. I'll stake you back in the game as long as you let the CIA bring him in. And Bond kind of thinks about this for a second, and he's like, and the winnings? And Felix is like, we're CIA. Does it look like we need the money? To which Bond should have replied, well, if you're the best poker player they've got. Because it's true that I agree with you that I really don't like the way they play Felix in this movie because he's not being very good at the card table. The fact that he's just made this plan with Bond and he doesn't have a plan to take Lashif when the game's going to be
I appreciate Leiter in this movie, and just because, he was at the table for the same amount of time that Bond was.
That's true. So he stakes Bond back in the game, and in this next round, Lashif's trying to use the bluff again, the tell. But he realizes no sooner than he does it that, Bond knows that I'm faking it this time. So he just folds, and we get to the next round of poker, and no sooner than this next round begins does Valenka poison Bond's martini. It's brought to him at the table. He takes a drink. There's an excellent shot of Lashif just kind of watching with this 1,000-yard stare type thing. Bond immediately starts feeling up. He's like, "Oh, deal me out." So he gets up. He grabs a glass and like a salt shaker or sugar shaker or something off the table. He goes into the bathroom, and they do this great thing with the cinematography where they turn up the light really bright. They start shaking the camera around so you start feeling as woozy as he does. He takes a drink of this with the water. He smashes the glass. He throws up in the sink. Then it cuts to him outside, stumbling like a drunk. He makes it to makes it to his Aston Martin.
Yeah.
And he does this interesting thing where he takes this pin and he sticks it in his wrist to touch the tracker thing, and that sets off an alarm. So MI6 knows to call him. And they're trying to figure out what he's been poisoned with. They figure out his digitalis. They tell him to get the defibrillator from the car, and Bond starts hooking it up. And they're making it really dramatic. They're waiting till the last second, but
I feel like you're skipping over a primary like detail about the entire process. Like the fact that he picks up a salt shaker and he pours that into a glass of water, and his first instinct is to throw up. And what do? Just drink salt water and you're gonna throw up. And so it escalates like through oh, Mr. Bond, are you perspiring? And then we get to the everything. Like, he does make it so that he is going to survive along the way. He realizes that he's been poisoned.
Yeah.
He has found the antidote until he can get to a safe place, which is his car. He gets back to the car and he finds out, and they say, get your defibrillator on. And then Vesper comes back and says, are you okay? And he says,
well, not just that. Vesper's,
how are you?
Well, not just that. Vesper's the one who saves him because he forgot to plug in the power thing on it. And because he had already passed out. And she's
but his response is the most charming because Vesper does save him. She does plug the defibrillator back into him. And then when he is defibrillated, she says, are you okay? And James Bond literally wakes up from a fucking cardiac arrest. And he's like, yeah, I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah. It's like, God, never better. And then the guy on the phone is like, make sure, get yourself off to a hospital. You know, Bond thanks Vesper, and the guy on the phone thinks he's thanking him.
I got a card game to go to, buddy. It's fine. It's fine.
Like, yeah, once I finish this game. She's like, you're not going back in there, are you? He's like, of course. He's like, oh, I
have to.
He's like, I wouldn't dream of it. But he goes back in, of course. And you have this great reaction from Le Chiffre when Bond sits back on the table, and he's like, I'm sorry, that last hand nearly killed me. And the look in Le Chiffre's face, it looks like he's about to weep blood again. Again, great bits from Mads Mikkelsen, because he just gives so much with having to end just so little. So it's great. So then we get the announcement from the guy managing the mediator of the game that they're moving into the final stage. By now, there's only 4 players left when they started with 10. So it's 2 of the other guys fold. It comes down to Bond and Le Chiffre. They make this really tense standoff. Le Chiffre's got like an ace and a 6. He's looking at it. He's confident.
Can you talk about the poker while I go get a beer? I really don't care about the poker part.
All right, so they're sizing each other up. The other players are throwing down their cards, and they're kind of semi-confident. But then Le Chiffre puts his 2 down, and he's very confident, enough so that he actually kind of smiles and laughs and kind of sniggers over at the other people sitting at the table. And then Bond finally gets to put his cards down, and it's aces full of spades, higher hand for Bond. He wins the game. Le Chiffre kind of tries to remain composed. You can tell he's really taking a deep, like swallowing really hard. He's starting to weep blood. He gets up and he storms off. Bond just gets up from the table to leave. Felix thanks him. He's like, yeah, much appreciated. Bond's like, he's all yours. And Felix is like, much appreciated, brother. And then Felix strangely kind of disappears from the movie at this point. It's not clear why Felix's plan goes awry. It just kind of does. So Bond feels justifiably confident.
That's interesting. I never thought about that.
Yeah, so Felix leaves, and Bond is justifiably thinks Felix has got this handled. So he goes into a restaurant, which was closed, but of course they're going to open it up for the guy who just won the $115 million pot. He sits down to have dinner with Vesper, and he's kind of feeling relaxed for the first time. He's laughing, kind of having a good time, and he sees that she's wearing this pendant, and he calls her out for it, saying it's an Algerian love knot, and the man who gave it to you should be really grateful. He's a very lucky man. Which is something else is interesting is Bond's subsequently going to forget in a little bit that Vesper even had a boyfriend. So,
not true.
Kind of, isn't it?
Haven't you seen the end of Quantum?
I know, but I meant in the terms of when he's recovering at the clinic. I'll get to that in a minute. So Vesper picks up the phone and she's like, "Oh, Mathis is called. The CIA has picked up Le Chiffre, and oh, Mathis needs me. I have to go." Bond says goodbye to her, and he sits there for a while, and he kind of thinks, wait, Mathis. And he gets worried because he's figured out that the reason Le Chiffre knew to bluff him, or to bluff him back, is because he had told Mathis about the tell. And he's like, that must be how Le Chiffre knew to trick me with the fake bluff in the other round. So Bond gets up and runs outside to find Vesper. He sees that she's being forced into a car. He runs across the parking lot, leaps over the chain fence, gets into his Aston Martin. He gives chase. And they drive out into the countryside, and I'm guessing the plan, there's 2 ways of looking at this. One is that Le Chiffre either didn't care if she got run over because they leave Vesper in the street, He's like, oh, we'll have Bond run her over. He'll hit the brakes. He'll rush over to get her, and then we'll ambush him. Because certainly he couldn't have wanted Bond to get in that crazy car crash because there's no way you'd guarantee he'd survive that, and you really need the password to break into the account.
All right. If we can excuse ourselves from the logic of the film for a moment, that is, at least at the time of filming, a Guinness Book of World Records for the most car flips or rolls, with the caveat of being assisted by an air cannon.
Yeah, an air cannon. They only used the shell of an Aston Martin. It was a different car underneath for.
And one of the, again, I'm sorry, you are talking about the plot and the emotional aspects. I also want to highlight the physical aspect of the stunts and the spectacle that James Bond movies are, like, the cornerstone of them are showing off things that you do in real life. One of the reasons why I find what is the one where Pierce Brosnan paraglides off of a thing, off of a tsunami, off of a...
Oh, yeah, Die Another Day.
Yeah, no, part of the reason why I hate Die Another Day is because none of it is real. It's all CGI shenanigans. And so with this one, I was really impressed. Like, Casino Royale is a practical effects, like, smorgasbord. And it does hold one of the Guinness Book of World Records for car rolls.
Yes, it does. So anyway, Bond gets in this big crash.
Yes.
Chief and his guys show up. They put the Vesper back in the car. They know that Bond has this tracker in his wrist. They get a switchblade and carve it out. And then Le Chiffre very casually is like, it seems that your friend Mathis is actually my friend Mathis.
This never makes sense.
Sort of. So So they put Bond. Here's the thing. So they put Bond in the car. They drive down to the docks. And
you're going to have to explain Mathis to me.
I'll explain that when we finish. So
all right,
you get down to the docks, and Le Chiffre basically decides that he's going to torture him for the password. And he's like, "Oh, Miss Lynn will give me the account number if she hasn't already."
The password is Vesper.
Yeah, and this is a scene that fans never thought they would see in a Bond movie either. At least when they announced that Casino Royale was going to be it, they're like, "Oh, they're gonna." Wuss out kind of like they do in the.
I was shocked.
Yeah, I was too, and I love how they shot this scene with the shadows and lights. Like the Chief is always in the shadow, Bond's like in the light. He's actually still got the bandage on his chest from the defibrillator thing, and so the Chief kind of sizes him up, and he's like, "Oh, you've taken such good care of your body." He's like, "Such a waste." And again, I love about this scene is you could tell that Le Chiffre is. It's not that the room is really hot; it's that Le Chiffre is scared because he needs that money. And you can see that he's like sweating bullets. And he's got the big rope, and he starts torturing Bond with it. And Bond, of course, proves that he's ever so cool because he has a sense of humor about it. Like, oh, to the left, no, to the right. And then eventually gets to the point where Bond.
No. I disagree with you wholeheartedly.
Oh, you don't think he was scared?
No, I think he was scared. But no, I think both parties were scared. I think James Bond and Le Chiffre were absolutely terrified. And I don't think that, and if I had to choose, I would say James Bond was the one in that room that had the power.
Well, that's what I mean. He did have the power because Le Chiffre he knows his number's up unless he gets the password, which is why you could tell throughout the torture scene, Le Chiffre is getting more.
The password is Vesper.
So throughout the scene, Le Chiffre is getting more and more agitated. Bond eventually starts cracking up and having a good time, saying, "Oh yeah, the whole world's gonna know that you died scratching my balls."
That is funny, but I don't know. There's something about that scene that is uncomfortable.
Well, it could be that it's a torture scene, and that it's kind of.
Well, I suppose it's the torture, yes.
And that it's a Bond, kind of graphic for a Bond film.
So, Scott, why were you uncomfortable during this scene? Well, it could have been the torture. Acceptable. Move along.
Yeah, so Le Chiffre finally concedes that after hitting Bond so many times, he's like, "You're really not going to give me the password, are you?" And Bond is like, "Nope, no matter what you do, I'm never going to give you that password." And Le Chiffre is like, "Your people would still welcome me with open arms."
Mm-hmm.
because you got to look at the big picture. And that's the first time that Bond almost feels like he's losing some of the, like he has no real options at this point, because he realizes, yeah, it is the big picture, that even though I'm going to do my duty and not give up the password, I'm going to let you kill me, but I know my boss is still going to take you in. And you can tell that Bond is really, in a sense, hurt by that. He's kind of like he said.
No,
he kind of says it under his breath when the chief tells him it's the big picture. Bond kind of very quietly says, "Big picture." He gets it. That there's nothing really he could do about it anymore. So the chief is finally fed up with Bond.
I disagree with that wholeheartedly.
I don't think, because you remember how he was saying it though, right?
I do, but
because initially he was laughing at Le Chiffre like, "Aha, you're gonna die."
But okay. So here's why, and there's nothing that is on screen. It's based entirely on your discussion. James Bond works for Her Majesty's Secret Service, right?
Yeah.
He's gonna do anything for that. Yes.
Yes.
So I don't know. I believe in the virtue of James Bond. James Bond will protect.
Well, yeah, that's what I just said. That's why he's not going to give up the password. And the reason that he finally feels like he's lost some of the he feels really distressed at this point is because he knows that even if he dies for Queen and Country in this moment, his bosses will so gladly take Le Chiffre in.
Yes.
And that's why he says big.
Oh, so we agree. It's great. Fine.
That's exactly. Well, that's what I said. That's what I said. So anyway, Le Chiffre finally realizes, oh man, you really aren't going to give me the password, aren't you? And he says no. So Le Chiffre kicks Bond's chair back. He's like, oh, he pulls out his knife. He's like, I'll feed you what you seem not to value. And he's about to castrate Bond, but then you hear some gunshots. And Le Chiffre now looks really scared because he knows who this is. And in comes Mr. White, walking towards Le Chiffre. He's got the gun aimed. He's not skipping a beat. And Le Chiffre is now actually tripping up on his words. He's like, I'll get the money. I got
the money. I got it. I have it. I'll get it to you soon. I swear.
And White's like, money isn't as valuable to our organization as knowing who to trust. And you have this great Dutch angle of that when he fires the gun and Le Chiffre falls over dead with a gunshot to the forehead, which I admit is a little bit of a buzzkill because Le Chiffre is such a great character and it's a great twist, but it just feels a bit.
Oh, no.
I felt that was a buzzkill because Mads Mikkelsen was so great in that role. I did not want to see him leave so early in the movie. So then Bond blacks out. He wakes up in this MI6 hospital on the shores of Lake Como. Beautiful place. And he's sitting out in his in this wheelchair on the lawn, and Mathis is there. And the cinematography is great because they're making you think that Mathis is the bad guy. Or he's like, oh, did they get a look at the killer? He's like, no. He's like, oh, I've been told to get you to drink this. And he's like, well, we'll have to piece it together and see what information we could that you can remember to help us out. And Bond's like, help us or help you? And Mathis is like, huh? And he sees these two agents coming up behind him. And he looks back at Bond, and they taser him for some reason rather than just, walking him away. So they taser him and drag Mathis off because Bond believes that Mathis is the one, because Le Chiffre told him that, oh, he's the guy who's been, handing over all your information. So, which admittedly Bond should have been suspicious of, since Mathis had no problem, framing the corrupt police chief and framing Le Chiffre's bodyguards. But, Bond doesn't question it. Vesper comes to see him. They're kind of flirting.
Yeah, Vesper's here.
Yes,
Vesper's here.
They're starting to flirt.
Yeah,
So they're starting to flirt, and in comes Mr. Mendel with the laptop, and he has Bond. He needs to enter the account number and the password. It seems like she only punches like maybe 5 digits, and I'm like, wow, this isn't really great security for a $115 million account. So then she turns to Bond to enter the password, and he's like, you know that. And she's like, no, I don't. He's like, sure you do. VES. And this is why I thought it was funny that he picks Vesper for the password, because the look she gives him is like she's kind of creeped out by it, because they weren't yet
no.
They weren't too buddy at the time that he made this password, and she kind of gives him this look almost like this is kind of like stalker-ish or something. So I
disagree. I think that she gives her I think that Vesper gives James an impression of appreciation. I think that him making the password Vesper surprises her in a romantic way.
I didn't get romance from that. So anyway,
I did.
Cool.
I find Casino Royale, Casano Royale to be an incredibly romantic story. Like, I find it just as romantic as On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I find this to be like with Tracy dying and with Vesper betraying. Like, I think that there is an intricacy of relationship, and I find these two stories to be fascinating in terms of the emotional trouble with the international intrigue. I love both these stories.
Yeah, I love this story.
And I think that Vesper is, I think James loves Vesper and Vesper loves James, but Vesper, she's looking out for her ex-boyfriend.
Yeah, so anyway, Bond even asked Mr. Mendel, did you bring chocolates? And he's like, no, afraid not. And he gives this like laugh, and Bond kind of gives this look in response, like he's kind of like, is this guy actually real? Almost like he's a cartoon character. So, they get they sign over for the account. Mr. Mendel leaves, and then Vesper's talking to Bond, and she's like, oh, James, your voice is starting to break, and she's like, if the only anything that was left of you was your smile, I would still, and Little Finger, I would still love you. And he's like, oh, he loves her. So this bleeds into like a montage where Bond is probably at this clinic for a few weeks, about a month or so, probably. They start making out inside his clinic room, and they're having a great time. And then cuts to this beach in Italy, and he mentions Mathis. And Vesper's like, well, what about Mathis? And he's like, well, remember the tell? Well, he told the chief, or I told Mathis, and Mathis told the chief. He's like, oh, there you go, lesson learned. And you look at the look on Vesper's face, because she knows that, this little frolicking love affair is not going to end well. And then they eventually go to this hotel.
Do you think Vesper loves James?
I think that's why she was having a hard time. Like like I was explaining, when her voice was breaking, she's James, the only thing that was left was your smile. Because if she's not in love with him, then it wouldn't really be that big of a deal for her to necessarily have to betray him for the man she actually loves. So I think she's actually falling for him at this point, because by now it's been like a month after the card game, about like a few weeks or whatever, because they've been.
Well, I would hope that his balls have been repaired.
Yeah, exactly. So they end up going to a hotel in Venice, and they they're doing all the Venice tourist thing, where they get on a little boat through the canal, and she spots Adolf Getler. He's got a vanilla colored fedora with sunglasses with one glass blacked out, because he's probably like one-eyed or whatever. And she kind of very carefully gives a look, but she's good to try and disguise herself. The Getler guy, totally a Bond villain, you could tell. So they go back to the hotel room, they spend the night, and they're talking about what they're going to do with the money. And she's like, oh, I'm going to go shopping. I'll go down to the bank and get it. Oh, no, James, you stay here, type of thing. So she goes to do that, and Bond gets a phone call. And it's M. And he's like, did you get my letter of, his letter of resignation, which he had mailed to M? And she's like, we'll talk about that later. But right now there's a man here from the account member, and he wants to know if you're ever going to deposit the winnings. And he's like, oh, that's fine. I thought we already did. So then Bond calls Mr. Mendel. And he's like, yeah, Mr. Mendel, I need to know about my funds. My account is not deposited. He's like, oh, yeah, your money's being withdrawn from our account right now, Mr. Bond. Is there a problem? You think he would have told him immediately, yeah, it's fraud. Stop it. But he doesn't. Bond races down to the bank, and he sees that Vesper's already left. And in a smart move, Bond doesn't immediately run up and grab Vesper. He wants to find out where she's going. So he slowly kind of tails her, falling behind a little bit, until they get to this condemned building on the river. She hands over the case of money to Getler. He's got a few bodyguards there, but Getler spots Bond, and he pulls a knife on her, and he's like, "I'll kill her." And Bond's like, "Allow me," because he feels totally betrayed at this point. Getler grabs Vesper, takes her into the condemned building. Bond fires off a few shots, gets in there. There's a mishap with the gun, and they fire into the inflatable raft things that are keeping the building suspended. And this leads into an excellent, and like you were saying, real action done for real, not CGI. They built this whole thing at the 007 stage, maybe at Pinewood. And in the book originally, she actually confesses to him and commits suicide at the hotel. In the movie, this is one of Paul Haggis's contributions to the script. He's like, no, she's got to be in the building with him. This is where the drama is really going to be. So you have this excellent action scene as the building is sinking into the river, and we're running out of time. Vesper's inside the elevator shaft, which has since kind of fallen apart slightly, so she can't really get out. The fight ends when Bond takes a nail gun and shoots it right through Gettler's eye. He rushes over to the elevator to get to Vesper, and she crawls up to the door. And she's got this really broken look in her eyes, and she's like, "I'm sorry, James." And she uses the key to lock herself in so you can't get to her. Shortly afterward, the elevator, like the shaft breaks, it falls into the water. Bond dives out, and this is where most of this, not all of the sound effects, but most of the sound effects go out because it's like getting really tense now. You're feeling that you're getting like almost, it's like the soundtrack is simulating that she's dying. And so he's swimming down there. He's trying to get to her. He grabs her hands and she kind of rubs her face on her hands to kiss him. And then she finally lets go. And it's like, she's starting to drown. Bond is panicking. He finally kicks open the door, tries to break in, and you don't actually see the moment where he does get her, but you do see him eventually take her back up onto the roof of the building, which is now level with the river. And he does his best to resuscitate her, trying as hard as he can, and he fails. And it's like the emotional bushwhack to this. Like, just like not but 20 minutes earlier, he was rich, retired, with the woman of his dreams, and had his whole life ahead of him to decide what he was going to do with himself. Now he is broke, unemployed, and the woman he loves is dead. And he's just completely shocked. He doesn't even give a shit about the money anymore. And we actually see Mr. White standing there with the suitcase of money walking away while Bond is just completely just destroyed.
Murder!
Yes. We then, great scene, by the way. One of my favorites in the series. We then cut to Bond sitting on a boat back at the river, and he's talking to M, and M's like, "Oh, she had a boyfriend. He was kidnapped by the same people behind Lashif, and they blackmailed her to help them. And we should have picked up on it, but sometimes we're so focused on our enemies, we forget to watch our friends." And she's like, "I guess this means we can let Mathis go." And he's like, "No, keep sweating him. It could have been a double blind." And M's like, "Oh, now you don't trust anyone, do you, James?" She's like, "No." She's like, "Oh, I guess you would have learned your lesson." And he's like, "Do you need any more time?" He's like, "Why should I have any time? The job's done. The bitch is dead." Another line I never thought they would actually translate to a Bond movie, that most fans didn't think they would put in the Bond movie.
But it was awesome!
It was awesome. And he says that, and M seems to take issue with him saying that. She's like, "James, didn't you ever think about why you were allowed to survive that night? She obviously..."
I know.
Yeah, she's like, "She obviously made a deal with them to let you go. But she must..." And then she's like, "Oh, but Vesper must have known she was going off to her death," which I kind of dispute, because if she believes she was going off to her death, then I think she would be smart enough to think that, well, that means they're probably going to kill my boyfriend too, in which case wouldn't probably go at all. But Bond mentions that she left her cell phone behind for him, and he checks it, and it says a message there for James, and it says Mr. White with a phone number. So then we cut to this beautiful Italian Renaissance estate on the shores of Lake Como, a real place. Mr. White drives up in his car. He doesn't have the money with him anymore, so I guess he's handed that off to whomever he needed to give it to. He takes a look at the lake. He's kind of enjoying himself, and he gets a phone call. And he answers it, and it's Bond. He's like, "Hello, Mr. White?" And White's like, "Who is this?" And bam! He gets shot in the leg. And this is where,
the knee!
In the knee or in the ankle, one of the two. And this is where the Bond theme finally kicks in. And this is where my theater, myself included, we're finally starting to get really excited because, Mr. White's crawling along. I mean, yeah, he's not the main villain of the piece, but he's responsible for everything that happened with Vesper. And because of all that emotion, we felt
nothing that screams James Bond like seeing an elderly man with a shot out knee just crawling across gravel.
Yes.
And whining for his life.
And I know, and the fact that this guy
screams James Bond, and so I appreciate that.
He sponsors
abuse.
He sponsors terrorism, and he's crying like a baby because he caught one little bullet, which makes you hate him even more. And then he starts trying to crawl towards the steps, but Bond starts walking in front of him. And Mr. White finally gives up the whole crying thing. He looks up, he's kind of angry. And I love that Bond is actually holding this really great like assault rifle rather than his pistol. And he's got his phone there looking at it, being super cool. Looks down at Mr. White, who looks up at him. Mr. White's like really angry. And Bond's just like, "The name's Bond, James Bond." And then we cut to Bond. And this is what I love about this movie. It's a character piece. The cinematography is excellent. I think Bond's chemistry with Vesper is the best chemistry that Bond has had with any Bond girl in the entire series. I love that there is a lot of emotion to that. Unlike last week when we talked about Her Majesty's, where it's like, for me anyway, where I thought, here's the 30-second montage, and now we're meant to believe it. Well, in this case, I believed it a lot more because there's so many scenes with Bond and Vesper that I bought into that relationship a lot more. And so
Alright.
I really connected with that. I think Lashif, again, is the best villain in the series. Mads Mikkelsen, he's sinister, he's scary. The fact that he can be intimidating, but the fact that he himself is very petrified and scared makes him like more of a real person. He's not like, Wile E. Coyote super genius. He's not like the evil supervillain type thing. He's very much a real threat and a real three-dimensional person, like kind of what they did with Bond. I believe Bond's vulnerabilities in this film. I believe his emotional feelings a lot more than in past instances. I like that this definitely does feel like an origin. It's like the big lesson he's learning from this is not to trust anybody ever again. I liked Felix, though I agree with you. I think Felix is done a lot better in the next movie. I do wish that Felix I do think that was a little bit of an issue. Felix just kind of disappeared.
I do like it when you agree with me.
I do find it a bit odd, though, that Felix just kind of disappeared from the movie. And it's just like, okay, maybe there was a scene off screen where he goes to see Bond at the clinic and he's like, hey, man, what happened? Kind of like that. Mathis, again, very much echoing Karen Bay, and I love that.
Well, Cat.
Yeah.
I have a funny feeling that we could talk about Casino Royale forever.
We could.
And
the action, of course, it's all real. See, I don't really have as much to say about movies that I like because I feel that it's almost self-evident why it's so good.
So do you like this movie?
Yes, the cinematography, the action, the three-dimensional characters, the acting.
How many martinis would you give this movie?
10 martinis.
Ooh.
Despite my gripes, despite my gripes with the thing about not just kidnapping Chief, because like he kidnaps Mr. White without batting an eyelash, and the fact that Felix kind of disappears from the movie, little things like that. The fact that they kind of abandoned the plot thread of Bond has caused an international incident in Madagascar, but I think they kind of get past it in this movie, and I love it. And it doesn't really bug me because everything is firing at all cylinders in this movie for me. So I give this a solid.
No, there's only one cylinder that they're missing. So I'm going to give this movie 9 martinis. What
one is missing for you?
I like my James Bond to be suave and elegant. I do appreciate that. I do like him to be, I don't know. He doesn't have to murder people first. He can charm his place somewhere first. And Daniel Craig cannot. He's not charming. Daniel Craig is not charming. And so Daniel Craig is always going to be not good.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with it with this because, again, it's a very different take on Bond. It's a three-dimensional character.
Yes, but by the time you get to the third one, like when you get to Skyfall, he's almost there, but he's still not charming.
Yeah, I guess that's true, but I don't mind it. I think it works for his version.
We'll talk about that when we get to Skyfall.
We'll talk about that when we get there, but I also love that this movie, it departs from the formula in almost every way, but I still think it works. Because, again, there's no evil plot or big overwhelming. You could argue that most of the stakes are done by the time we get to the card game, but I
was totally taken with the stakes. I thought that the stakes were James Bond appropriate.
All right, Edge of Time chimes in. He says, time, Edge of Time.
Are we going to chat? Okay, fine.
That's what Steve.
I'm gonna have to put on. I'm gonna have to do glasses now. So LDG of geeks, Captain Deckard Spock, ahoy! You cup of kernels. Moldy Han, yay! MG and G. Moldy Han says Daniel Craig is incredibly hot. Absolutely agreed.
Yep.
Really? You agree?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, okay. Tom Jr. Jackson says just the tip in your butt. Moldy Han, hey, there was a sticker. Thank you, Moldy. Tom Jr. Jackson says, holy cow, who is the person behind Scotty R37? Well, that would be Kat. Kat is the person behind me. She actually knows most of the things about James Bond. I just show up and talk. Moldy Han says one of his mirror universe variants.
That's what Tom was talking about, the person behind you, because you're in front of a mirror. Or the mirror's behind you, rather.
I don't even know how to address this. Tom
Awesome.
Jr. Jackson. Hey, super sticker. Thank you. Oh my God. I want to make a Last Starfighter reference, but I don't know.
All right,
Would you care to read this one?
Tom says, I shall ingest all almost 3 hours of No Time to Die. That's true.
I know. It just seems too long.
Yeah. Michael Rochburn says, the kids like Billie Eilish. I never heard of her until she did the song. Tom says he likes Billie Eilish and that she's amazing and kind of likes older guys. Okay. Edge of Time says, who dis Baldy eyelash?
Who dis Baldy? Well, I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm sure it has something to do with like Billie Eilish.
Oh, right.
Tom Baldy eyelash, Billie.
Yeah. Casino Royale with Cheese is amazing film, and the action scenes are even more intriguing.
Quite.
I think it's cheesy. Austin Powers.
True.
Yeah, that's what Todd Michael says. Yes, that's true. They were trying to avoid that a lot. God, he saw Casino Quarter Pounder. I don't think it's that cheesy. But Michael.
But I like that. I like that reference. I do like that.
They made an excellent Austin Powers slot machine back in 2000. Got sucked into it in Vegas for like an hour due to all the audio and video clips in it. That's kind of fun. Michael Rochburn says, I do need to see the Bourne films one day. Yeah, I like the first two. The third one I thought was okay. The fourth one kind of bad. And then the fifth one is just, they overdid it on the cameras and the shaky cam and stuff. And I was like, I was getting sick when I saw it in the theater. And it was kind of creatively bankrupt. Michael Rochburn says, you've never watched James Bond until you've watched him in the original Klingon.
True story. I'm a Dahar master.
Tom says, I've got to rewatch the Bourne films again. Yeah, I have this up on my shelf.
See, and one of the things, like, Kat, I've been having a really good time watching these James Bond movies with you, like from the beginning and watching them in order. Like, it's really, really strange and amazing. And I think that if you're looking for something to watch, don't watch the Jason Bourne movies. Watch through the history of cinema.
Yeah.
Like
Captain Deckard Spock says, aha, we are here already.
We are. You should definitely look through action movies from the 60s until today and see where they land.
A bit of the old internal canonical verisimilitude.
Yes, quite.
Edge of Time says, John Carter says, save the planet or die trying. Yep.
I refuse. This planet is useless.
Michael Rochburns asks canonical verisimilitude. What is he talking about? Or he's asking the other guy. He's asking the other guy what he's talking about. Spock says, accepting different actors as one person is in this example. Yes, that's true. Kind of like they did when they went from Connery to Lazenby and tried to say it as the same guy. Edge of Time says, on the streets we call it ICV. Thanks for the definition, Rochburn says. Okay. Spock says, it's pretty much all we talk about on my channel. Scotty loves it.
I do, except for when you're wrong.
Todd Michael says, I'm not a deep Bond fan, only a casual fan, and missed most films from the 90s and 2000s. I always thought that the James Bond title, much like the Code 007, could have been a handed-down name.
I disagree with that interpretation.
I know that the purists don't like that, but it's like, in a way, that's kind of what some fans go to try and rationalize the change in actors, but I've just never really thought about it. Captain Spock says, or Deckard Spock says, only George Lazenby lampshaded the change. This never happened to the other fellow. Yes, that is very true. Yeah, we did talk about he broke the fourth wall quite a lot. Edge of Time says, I like how Chuck Barris's first kill goes to hell.
Oh, if you're a fan of Chuck Barris, then you should definitely see. What was the name of that movie that George Clooney
Confessions
directed?
of a Dangerous Mind?
That is something that you should absolutely watch. If you are watching this and listening to our voices, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind is a great movie. Would you agree, Kat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Captain Deckard Spock's like, psych!
Psych!
Rochburn says, I never thought about it, but the recasting of Bond is almost the same as the recasting of the Doctor and Doctor Who, but without an implication they are all the same person, right? Yeah, I think the only time I felt that they explicitly implied it was supposed to be the same guy was when they went from Connery to Lazenby, because Lazenby, they explicitly referenced the earlier films, whereas with Roger Moore, Not until the pre-title scene in For Your Eyes Only, where they tried to tie it back into Tracy, which seemed a bit odd because of the timeline. And I've kind of written it off kind of like Mad Max. It's like, no, like when people ask George Miller, what's the Fury Road thing? Is it a prequel? Is it a sequel? It's like, dude, it's a Bond film. Just, or a Mad Max film. Just enjoy it. And I kind of feel the same way about Bond, other than that one time with Lazenby where they tried to say it was the same. So Tom says, I love the casino scenes when they were playing cards because they're intense scenes, but when Bond is on top of the crane fighting, that is the most anxiety-ridden scene, but beautifully shot.
Yeah.
I agree entirely.
It's amazing.
Captain Deckard Spot says, exactly that. 007 is a title, but James Bond is one specific person according to official canon. Yes, that is true. He follows up with, whereas in Star Trek, Pine's Kirk is canonically in a different timeline from Shatner's.
Yeah.
And Doctor Who is one being with two hearts and several faces.
Mm-hmm.
Tom asks you, should maybe take notes so he knows what he's talking about, little crib sheets. Oh, come on, Tom. We're having a good time. We're making it work. Todd Michael says, time for this Pollock to make a tree and get the fuck out of here. Later, everyone. Take care, Kat and Scotty. Oh, thank you, Todd Michael. Have a good time. Tom's shaken but not stirred.
I love hanging out in the chat because I know once we get to hang out in the chat, I'm like, yeah, I'll hang out for here. And then I'm just going to be like.
So Tom says, from beginning to end, Casino Royale is a film that keeps you on the edge of your feet. That is true.
Honestly, as a construct, it is the best James Bond movie.
Yeah, I love it. It doesn't even need the formula. It works so well for me on all cylinders. I love it. Like I said, I could talk about this movie for hours, and we'll be talking about it more next week. Tom says, or if you want to be technical, the edge of your seat. Yes, that is the proper expression. Right there was the scene where Bond fights the guys in the kimono dragon pen, which is a badass scene. That is in Skyfall.
Hashtag foreshadowing.
Yeah. I had an issue with that scene. Okay, I'm enjoying the Martinis, gadgets, guns, drive-ins, and dives. Take Bond to Flavor Town. Those poker scenes are intense. Yes, they are intense. And to think that the 33-minute centerpiece of the movie is a card game is great.
But I wish I could learn how to play Baccarat.
Yes. Tom says when Mads loses, the look on his face, priceless. Yes, it is. He does so much with so little. When Vesper saves Bond, that is when she begins to show affection for Bond. I think she kind of started showing affection for him when they were in the shower a bit, because he takes care of her, and then in the morning she kind of feels a bit. I mean, obviously, I think even if they weren't in love, she still would have tried to save him from being, having a heart attack. But okay, so he follows up with Bond being beaten was intense, but a good scene. Yes, it was. A beautiful place, Catherine says, as if she stayed there and given a Yelp review. I wish I'd stay there. My friends, I think you're talking about the lakeside place at Lake Como. My friend's actually going there for his brother's wedding next year. Kind of cool. Tom says, is that normal that Scott goes into an echo chamber?
Yes, I only like hearing my own opinions.
I think he means the actual echo on the audio.
No, but I like listening to me.
All right, so LDG, thumbs up. Thank you.
Is that it?
Let me double check. But yeah, that's it. But I love that this movie.
So come on, a 9 out of 10 martinis.
Yeah, I give it 10 martinis. I love the reinvention of the franchise, and call it superstition. Martin Campbell, he brought the franchise back with GoldenEye. He brought it back again with Casino Royale. I really hope he brings it back for Bond 26. And we will be talking more about this movie and the rest of the Craig era as we move on. Next week, we'll be covering Quantum of Solace, followed by Skyfall, then Spectre, and a special probably Saturday, October 9th episode for No Time to Die. That's what our tentative aim for that is. So thank you for joining Scott and I on Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns.
Oh, what? I was here?
Yes, you were. Tom says, takes care of her in the morning. Yeah. So, yes, thank you all for joining us. We will be back next week. I am Kat, and I forgot my name for a second. And you are...
I'm Scotty R37. Kat is my opposite number. We are so happy that you are here. The Fantasmagorium. And Steve, I don't know. He's like our Felix Leiter. We're hoping for guests. If we can have guests, that'll be great. And ultimately, what are we doing next week?
We'll be covering Quantum of Solace.
All right. Sounds all right.
That's good.
We'll see you next week.
See you next week.